What's up, guys? Are you tired of playing degenerate Gem Knight FTK decks and Pendulum Magician FTK decks, and you're just tired of not having a turn and not being able to play the game? Well, I guess you're in luck, because today we're going to bring you a much more fair deck, a plant FTK deck for the TCG. Before I jump into the profile, let's talk real quick about the plant FTK deck in the OCG. The deck is represented pretty well. It tops a lot of events. They also have a lot of cards that we don't have, so the plant FTK hasn't really taken form in the TCG yet, outside of one or two fringe cases that I've seen or talked to some friends that play plants and stuff. But we don't have Summon Sorceress yet. We don't have Needle Fiber yet. We don't have any of the Troymare cards for the extra deck. And I think that's pretty much it. The main deck differences between the TCG and the OCG revolve pretty much around Needle Fiber. Hopefully in Flames of Destruction we'll get some of those cards. And I know we're getting Summon Sorceress as a jump promo. But when we get those cards, this list will change significantly. The OCG doesn't even play the Brilliant Fusion Engine. They opt to play things like Armageddon Knight and Destrudo and the Blackwing, I forget the name of it, but the tuner that makes a token. I'll go ahead and get started. We got 3 Lone Fire, 3 Scorpio, and 1 Cobra. The Cobra, some people play 2. It's probably not incorrect in this deck because you actually need more plants in the deck. I just play the 1 right now because I hate drawing it. I know playing 2 kind of fixes that, but knowing me, I'll draw 2 of them. But in this deck, I can search Brilliant Fusion and Instant Fusion. Then you get to play 3 of a weird card, Evil Thorn. This guy basically says it's a level 1 dark plant, and you contribute it to summon up to 2 Evil Thorns from the deck, and your opponent takes 300 damage. The 2 that you summon from the deck, however, can't tribute to burn your opponent. Keep in mind that the 300 damage is actually relevant. I'll go into why, so I'll leave this guy off to the side here, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. To round out the rest of the plants that you play, you just play 1 Glow Bulb and 1 Spore, as well as the Phoenixian Cluster Amaryllis. This is the reason that the FTK exists. A lot of the OCG decks play Glow Bulb. A lot of decks in general play Glow Bulb because of Naturia Beast or because of Link extension plays or whatever, but Spore I think is good for now until we get Needle Fiber, because you can banish a Lone Fire with Spore and do some plays out of the extra deck that are interesting. For those of you that don't know what this card does, basically, this guy says he can only be summoned by his own effect, and if he's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can banish a plant to summon him, and then your opponent takes 800 damage each time he's destroyed. Essentially, well, he doesn't have to be destroyed by an effect to summon itself. You just banish a plant from your graveyard, but there's a combo with 10 plants in your graveyard, and as long as this guy plus 10 other plants, and then Topologic Bomber Dragon, you can loop the Cluster and Bomber Dragon triggers during the end phase to do 8,000 burn damage. So that's what makes it an FTK as opposed to an OTK. Some of the other cards we play, I'll just move these plants out of frame here. Some of the other cards we play, 1 Mathematician. There's a version that I wanted to test where you play 2 Mathematicians and then some other type of extender cards like Spell Striker, or maybe Junk Forward as level 3 Earths that can special summon themselves without much of a cost. Basically so that you could have access to Malaya the Trees in the extra deck. This particular version doesn't have access to that. Mathematician, though, is not a bad additional normal summon off of Seraph Knight, and it lets you send, whether you need like a Spore or a Glow Bulb, or maybe a Fairy Tale Snow, which you play 2 of, to the graveyard. It's just a good way to set up some combos and maybe extend some Link plays. And then Snow, the OCG doesn't play this card either, mostly because they don't really need to. The FTK is a lot more clean cut for them, but for the TCG, because we're lacking a lot of the combo pieces that they have, I figured it was just a good card to have to send off of Curious sometimes if you already had a way to put the Cluster in the graveyard, or it's a good card to send with Mathematician to like kind of keep you alive if you fail the FTK, or also to extend the FTK if you need more monsters. you play 1 Goblinberg and 1 Thousand Blades. Mostly have to play the Goblinberg because if you draw 1,000 Blades, then the Mrs. Radiant combo is kind of dead. The Invoker targets. So you play one of each of those. And then because we play Brilliant Fusion, you gotta play the Garnet, unfortunately. And then you play the 1 Damage Juggler with the Trick Line and the 2 Hat Trickers. That's like your Perform Age package, whatever you want to call it. The Hat Trickers are good extenders, as well as fuel for Naturi Beast potentially. And then the Damage Juggler and Thousand Blades, or Trick Clown, whatever, can summon Thousand Blades and search Hat Tricker, and they're good for Brilliant Fusion. The only light targets we play for Brilliant Fusion are the 2 Snows and the 2 Clown cards. And then for the rest of the monsters, we just play 3 Ash Blossom. I don't know, it's Ash Blossom. There's not a lot to explain. It doesn't contribute to the FTK, but it's kind of a necessary evil. We don't have any other hand traps in the deck, so you could argue that you should cut these and play other combo facilitation cards, but there's also one play with this card that comes up, so I'll set it to the side as well. So for spells, we play 3 Brilliant Fusion. Not a lot to explain there. The card is super good. It sucks, you know, in consistency sometimes, but between the 3 Lone Fires, the 3 Predator Plants, and the 3 Brilliant Fusions, you're basically playing 9 copies. So if you can resolve this card and not get ashed, you should be in good shape to push out 8,000 so damage. So hopefully nothing ever happens to this card. I like that card too much. 3 Super Solar Nutrient. This is another difference from the OCG. This is just kind of a starter card to where you can, if you don't know what the card does, I guess I'll explain it real quick. You tribute a level 1 or level 2 plant, and then you can special summon a plant from your deck that is equal to or less than its level plus 3. So you can tribute Glow Up Bulb, Spore, or an Evil Thorn to special summon a Lone Fire or a Protoplant from your deck. When the monster leaves the field, this card also dies. That's not relevant to anything, but basically it's just another 3 copies of Lone Fire if you want to look at it that way. So you just want to have a lot of access to your starter cards, and this is one of the few starter cards that, outside of Brilliant Fusion, that I felt like was worth playing. I'm pretty happy this card was printed. You play 3 Call by the Grave. Essentially, if you go first, it's better than Gamma versus like Ash Blossom or Ghost Ogre. It's not once per turn. If your opponent plays a hand trap on you, you just chain this from your hand as a quick play, and then they have to discard the hand trap to activate it, so you chain and banish it, and basically just negates hand traps. So there's also some other situations that come up where if you go first and you don't FTK them and you just kind of set up a board, you can set Call by the Grave and negate some random card effects like BA or Dino effects or Lightsworn cards. So it's a good card overall. And then a bunch of one-ofs here. We got the pretty obvious expected ones, Monsterborn, Soul Charge, and Foolish Burial. These cards are all power cards in the deck. If you draw any of these cards, you're probably in good shape, so we're going to play them. And then some other one-ofs that might need a little more explaining, but also should seem pretty obvious, is 1-for-1, you can basically summon Glow Up Bulb or Evil Thorn from your deck, and then Instant Fusion, we have Instant Fusion target in the extra deck that I will mention. And for the extra deck, we do 1 Link Rebo. Sometimes you have to play Link Rebo to get rid of an Evil Thorn and have different names for Sir Yugioh. So a lot of versions might not think that it's necessary, but I think that this card's good. And then you play 2, you play, for Link 2s, you just play Mrs. Radiant. I was playing Underclock Taker for a while too, but there's one particular combo that I kind of like as an extension to get the 8,000 damage across, so I cut Underclock for now, but keep in mind that it's worth probably playing Underclock Taker if you have room for it. The 1 Curious, 9 times out of 10 you're going to send the Cluster Amaryllis plant card to your graveyard with this. The random 3 mills, there's a few useful things you can hit, but there's not really a lot that your combo doesn't necessarily rely on the mills, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but if you mill plants, it's always good. Then you play 2 Yugioh. There may be merit to playing 3 of this card. I could cut this 1 Firewall Dragon for the 3rd Yugioh, but you go into 2 at least very often. The Firewall doesn't come up very often, but sometimes you can co-link it to get back a Lone Fire and extend to win that way. More often than not, Yugioh is what you're really aiming to go for. Once you've kind of extended through your hand with the Brilliant Fusion Predaplant combo, then Yugioh can dig through the top of your deck twice. And at that point of your combo, if you've gone Lone Fire, Lone Fire, Lone Fire into the Predaplant, maybe gotten the Evil Thorns out of your deck ahead of time, the Yugioh is going to see a pretty good percentage of your deck when it draws 4, because you've already thinned through your deck by like 15 or 20 cards due to the opening hand and then the plants that cycle through your deck. So Yugioh goes without saying is a crazy card. If you can make 2 to 3 in 1 turn, then that's pretty crazy. But then the last Link monster you play is this guy. If you don't know what this card does, basically if a monster is special summoned to a zone that it points to, it blows the field up. So it's part of the combo. 10 plants in the graveyard, banish a plant to special the cluster, Topologic triggers to destroy it, and then the cluster's in the grave, but it's still your end phase, and it's not a once per turn effect, so you can just keep banishing plants to summon it, and each time you do, they take 800. So this card, some of the hardest problems the TCG version of this deck has versus the OCG is that with some hands you can get to 10 plants in your graveyard, but then you also have to somehow make this guy, so it requires Yugioh to hit some good cards that you can special summon, or some good extenders like Reborn or Soul Charge. So the OCG doesn't have that problem. They're way more fluid. That's why you don't see this deck have any success anywhere, but I wanted to post this so that people could at least try it. The instant fusion target is this guy. I like it over Thousand Eyes Restrict because he can negate hand traps. Basically, if a monster effect is activated, you can negate it, so it's just a way to out an Ash Blossom or a Ghost Ogre or what have you. Then the only other fusion you play is the Seraph Knight for the Brilliant Fusion. For Synchros, our backup plan, pretty much, if we fail the FTK, is just to make an Achiri Beast and have a Fairy Tale Snow in the graveyard and hope it's good enough. I know that that's not the most impressive board, but we're kind of all in on the strategy of burn you for 8,000. So if we fail that, we at least have some kind of game plan for a backup plan. But Achiri Beast is a really strong card, of course. The only other synchro we play, which might sound crazy, is shout out to like 2008, we played Dark Strike Fighter. This isn't the errated version, but basically the errated version says that it can't burn your opponent to 0, and I believe that it's once per turn. So part of the combo that you can do, I separated these Evil Thorns earlier because you can use the Evil Thorn to burn your opponent for 300, and then you can use Yugioh to special an Ash Blossom and synchro with Snow to make Dark Strike Fighter. Dark Strike contribute itself to do 14. So 1400 plus the 300 from Evil Thorn is 17. And I know that's not 8,000, but what it does do is it requires 2 less plants in your graveyard at the end, because for every interval of 800 burn damage that you do to your opponent, that requires less plants during the end phase for the Amaryllis combo. So there's some hands where you can get 3 Lone Fires, the 3 Evil Thorns, and then the 2 Predaplants, but you can't quite get to maybe Glow Bulb or Spore or some of the other Predaplant guys. Maybe you were unlucky with your mills with Curious or Minerva or whatever during your combo, so this just helps you be able to kill them still. So I think Dark Strike's actually underrated. The rest of the extra deck, we got some Exceeds. This is just for the Brilliant Fusion combo. That's pretty self-explanatory. Then you got Minerva. You don't play any Lightsworn cards, but mill in the 3. There's certain game states where you have maybe a leftover Hat Tricker and a Snow in your grave, and you've already made doubles for Yugioh, but you have enough basically resources to make Topologic, but your deck is say 15 cards, where the bottom 6 are spells or whatever that you put back with Yugioh. So when you mill 3 out of like 9 cards, you have basically the math breaks down to this should almost always hit the 1 plant that you need to finish with your 10. So there's a little bit of luck factor there if you choose to go that route. But thanks to Dark Strike Fighter, you don't always need to. This is just kind of another backup. A quick side note too, this probably could be Baguska, so that you have another going second option if you can't make an Achiri Beast, but not going second, but if you fail the FTK. And then this card's pretty important. 2 Evil Thorns can make this guy, and basically he excavates the top card of your deck, and if it's a spell, it goes to your hand, and if it's a monster, it goes to the graveyard. So either of those things are pretty much good for you generally. A lot of times you'll do your combo with Brilliant Fusion and stuff first, so you don't risk hitting anything like important off of this to mill it. So, and the other really important part of this is that it's a plant itself, so it counts for the 10 plants at the end. Then the last card in the extra deck is Matarasu. So there's plays with Spore, where Spore's in your graveyard, you can banish a Lone Fire Blossom and use maybe a Spore, a Hat Tricker, and a Snow to make a Matarasu, and then a Matarasu can summon the Lone Fire back, and then the Lone Fire can just kind of pop off and get some Evil Thorns or the Predoplant. So it's a good extender. It can also get a Ash Blossom back to your hand if you fail the FTK, so that's important. I have a side deck built. Mostly I played this in some side events at the Maryland Regional this past weekend for fun, mostly just to test hands and see kind of the way it interacts with people outside of my locals, just to see. But this was my side deck. It didn't come up a whole lot because I didn't play a whole lot, but 2 Chaos Hunter for essentially Lightsworn decks, but it's good against like some other matchups in the meta like Trickstars, and good against Reincarnation and some other cards. Then you played in the side deck a whole bunch of board wipes. Dark Horigeki, Slumber, and then a little Kaiju package. This is just if you go second against a deck that is not True Draco, basically. So this is good against most other matchups. 3 Anti-Spell. This card definitely hurts you, but if you're against Pendulum Magicians and you go first and it's like game 3 or something and you want to just try to side out some of the cards that don't necessarily go with the combo, like maybe you're going first against Pendulums, I would say that this is better than Ash Blossoms if you're going first. So you draw through your deck enough with Yugioh that if you don't kill them, you'll pretty much see this card and they have to have an out to it immediately. So, and then the last card is Evenly Matched. This card could also replace the Ash Blossoms in the main board if you wanted to, but I like the Ashes for the Dark Strike combo. That is it. So, sorry this video is so long, just kind of a lot to explain, but if you made it this far, I appreciate you. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and share this video. I'm trying to get to 1K subs, and I'm slowly but surely getting there, so I appreciate everybody who's taking the time to watch, and peace.